And I'm being joined by Teivo Teivainen, Professor of World Politics, University of Helsinki. Good morning, sir. Delighted to have you with us.
Good morning. Good morning.
So let's actually start with discussing what has Ukraine received recently and whether this new equipment made any change, any significant, contributed to any significant change on the front lines. Can we already see that or not yet?
Well, as we see, Ukraine is having some trouble with Russia now. The impact of the recent arms deals is, of course, apart from the material importance, psychological. The United States, for example, is finally supporting more arms, gives some hope for the future. But it's hard to say now what exactly is happening in the front line, and the recent announcements that the United States is allowing Ukraine to use weapons also inside Russian territory in some contexts can be significant here.
Mm-hmm. Right. What about aerial defenses? Because, we have some countries that, the leaders of these countries are talking about, of course, allowing Ukraine to use Western weapons to attack Russian territory, right? And we have Great Britain here. Recently, we have also the US. But we also have countries such as Italy, for instance. Giorgia Meloni has been against this, but she was advocating for more air defense systems for Ukraine. So do you see that translating into what's happening on the ground? Perhaps more Patriot systems or something of the sort?
Well, there are various aerial systems here. Sweden also now more recently provided some additional help for the aerial system. The debate about air defense has been going on from the beginning, and of course one dimension of it that has not been spoken about so much recently, but that might become an issue, is to what extent there should be, whether Western allies should help Ukraine close its airspace, which of course would be a big move. And with all these different proposals, the big question there is there some kind of red line that Western countries should avoid crossing? Or is the idea of not crossing a red line playing in the hands of Putin? And we see that clearly in all the debates about what kind of arms and with what kind of use allowed for Ukraine the West can give.
Professor Teivainen, let me ask you about the academic discourse. During your lectures at university, are you discussing the future of Ukraine? What needs to happen for this war to be over? Because we keep discussing the current developments, but it seems like it's, just dragging on with no end in sight.
Well, I don't think there's any unified academic discourse on that. I think some academics, as I see it, are saying that in order to reach a peace, just peace, or any peace, there need to be give and take. So the discourse of the politicians is sometimes historically in conflicts like, okay, we are not giving in, we are not giving in, we are not giving in, and then at some point, everybody has to give in. So some academics are saying that this is what happened historically, and this is what might happen now, and in order to achieve some kind of peace, there might be need for territorial concessions on both sides, whether they mean really permanent cuts on sovereignty or some other mid-term or short-term arrangements. So I see more of that kind of discourse in academic circles, whereas in political circles, of course, the politicians need to send a message and saying we are not giving in, and we will not. We will never make a peace that implies territorial concessions. So that's one of the differences. But in academia, like in many quarters of life, there are many, many positions there.
Right, absolutely. What about the Ukraine Peace Summit, the one coming up in Switzerland? Are you expecting any new developments following that?
Well, now recently it seems China has quite firmly said they will not attend. and of course Russia is not invited. It is a process, the Swiss peace process. Something, for example, government of Finland and yesterday President of Finland very much emphasized that now in the coming couple of weeks that will be one of the main emphases in his and Finnish foreign policy as regards Ukraine. So there are many hopes deposited there. I don't see any reason to think there's a major breakthrough there, but we don't know, to be honest. With
Right.
China, it would be more feasible to reach an agreement.
Right. I was actually just going to ask you that, sort of China not attending is definitely, it seems that like bad news for Ukraine. And I wanted to ask you about this sort of China-Russia alliance. I mean, how strong is it? And is it, a Chinese way of saying, that we stand with Russia as opposed to, being involved in the peace talks with Ukraine?
Well, China not attending in the Swiss peace forum is certainly seen as something where China is taking in that sense a little bit more side of Russia, and if Russia is not in, then we will not be either. More generally, of course, the China-Russia relationship is a complicated one. It seems to me and to many others that China is the stronger partner, and Russia is perhaps more in need of partners like China. So China has a lot to win also from that relationship. At the same time, China needs to play, and it seems to be playing the kind of game where it will not make Western countries too annoyed or angry about in what ways China is providing help for Russia, so that it wouldn't hurt too much China-West relationship. And I don't see major changes there. That's how it's been for the last some months and a couple of years actually already.
Right. And now let me turn to some of the Western countries. What would you say to an argument that some of these countries have a vested interest in the war in Ukraine prolonging itself, so to speak, because they're delivering these arms and can hence modernize their armies and are also starting to invest more in the sort of defense industry altogether. So, because there has been this argument floated that perhaps it's in the interest of some of these Western countries to, sort of keep delivering these arms. What do you think about this?
Well, here also one observation is that countries are not just countries with a unified will. So within many countries, including the United States, you of course have very strong and influential interest groups in arms industry that might be quite happy with the kind of gains they get from selling more arms. Some countries might think, like in Finland and some other countries, the idea is also, okay, we focus on providing more arms and it's part of an effort where we also find arms for ourselves, and there's a sort of unified militarized discourse about the importance of arms, where national defense and defense of Ukraine are seen as very united together. So I think within many countries, there are different kinds of interest groups. I wouldn't say that outright some particular country would be willing for the war to continue and for the reason of being able to provide arms. But there are interest groups that might be doing so.
Right, Professor, since you're based in Helsinki, let's turn to the Nordic countries and their support for Ukraine. There was this recently new agreed support packages, right, for Ukraine by the Nordic countries, following also the NATO summit in Prague. So what are we expecting in the near future?
Well, I don't see any major changes there. The position seems to be as, for example, President of Finland put it, that there are short-term goals that are providing help, both money and arms, to Ukraine so that it can win the war. Then midterm sort of goals that are related to obtaining just peace, as they would put it, and then perhaps longer-term goals of getting Ukraine in the European Union and NATO. So this is more or less the position that some of the countries in the Nordics have, or at least that they claim as their three policy goals. But now what happened in the summit is that after yesterday's summit, all Nordic countries have also signed bilateral agreements with Ukraine, and it seems that in the both in the discourse and in the deeds, if we look at what countries provide most support for for Ukraine in relation to GDP, we of course have the Baltic countries for perhaps for obvious reasons, and then Denmark. Then I think in the fifth place we have Finland and Poland sharing not so different shares of GDP support for Ukraine, and other Nordics are also there. So the Nordic role is, of course, important, but in some absolute sense, bigger countries, including United States, France, etc., Germany, their support is, of course, can be more important for Ukraine in the battlefield.
Right. Professor Teivo Teivainen, University of Helsinki, thank you, sir, for being with us this morning.
Thank you.